Hi, I'm Lauren, and today we're going to go through the basics of using Stata, and we're going to use the Framingham dataset from the course as an example to help us get familiar with Stata. So the first thing you're going to want to do is download the Framingham dataset to your computer. Right beneath this video that you're watching, you'll see a link for the Framingham dataset. So click on that link, and then you should be able to save the Framingham dataset somewhere on your computer. And remember where you've saved it so you can go back throughout the course and access this data set. Now, double-click on the Stata icon to open up Stata on your computer. If you've opened up Stata, you should see the Stata interface in front of you right now. So in this tutorial, we're just going to go through the basics of the Stata interface and get you familiar with how to use Stata and the basics of Stata. So the first thing you're going to notice when you open up Stata is there's a bunch of windows, and then we have a drop-down menu up at the top. There's two general approaches to using Stata in practice. You can use the drop-down menus and navigate to different commands, or you can manually type in all of your commands through the command window. The first thing that I want to do is discuss with you briefly how to use the drop-down menus. Now, whether you use drop-down menus or the command line is your preference. Using the command line is a little bit more difficult, but in the end, it's going to end up saving you a lot of time. But for now, let's just explore what's available for us within these drop-down menus. The first menu that we're going to want to look at within Stata is the File menu. And this is the menu that you can use to open up data sets, to import data, to export data, to save data files. It's sort of a workhorse within Stata. So this File menu is going to come in handy pretty frequently. The next menu that you'll end up using on a regular basis is the Data menu. And you can see that it's used sort of to look at your data, to manipulate your data. It's anything dealing with your data you're probably going to do through the Data menu. Pretty intuitive. On the other hand, we have the Graphics menu, also intuitive. Any graph you want to make, you're going to do through this Graphics menu. Probably the most important drop-down menu that we're going to use in this course is the Statistics menu. So this is where all of your epidemiology commands are going to be located. It's where all of your biostatistics commands are going to be located. If you want to do a statistical analysis in Stata, you're going to do it using the Statistics menu. The final drop-down menu that we're going to use on a frequent basis, probably, is this Help menu. So if you want easy access to the Stata help documentation or searching for help in Stata, you can do so through this Help menu. So now that we've explored the drop-down menus, we're going to look at the command window, or the windows within Stata. And when you open up Stata, you're going to see that there are 4 windows available to you. There's this results window. This is where the results of any analysis that you do in Stata are going to appear. There's a command window. We've discussed this briefly. If you want to type commands into Stata, every command you're going to type in is going to be through this command window. Next, we have the review window. Once you've typed a command into Stata, or if you've run a command through the drop-down menu, that command is going to appear in this review window. And that's very useful because then you can go back and you can access the commands that you've previously run if you want to tweak them or run them on a different variable. So that's the review window. Next, we have the variables window. So once I have a data set open in Stata, all of the variables and the labels for those variables will appear in the variable window. And last, and this is new to Stata 12, we've got this other little tab down here that's properties. And what it has is it has details of a variable if you've clicked on a specific variable in the variables window, or it also has down here properties of your data set, such as the number of observations, the number of variables, the name of your data set. So it's just helping you keep track of exactly what you're working on in Stata at that time. Now that we've had our general tour of Stata, what we're going to want to do next is open up our Framingham dataset. Datasets in Stata have the extension .dta. So if you have a dataset that you want to read into Stata, you're going to either need to import it using the import command if you have an Excel spreadsheet, etc. But what we're providing for you is a Stata dataset. So if you already have that .dta Stata file, you can just go File, Open. and you have to find where you've saved your data set. I saved my data set in the My Documents folder. So double click on your data set once you've found it, and you should now have the data open in Stata. And you will know that you have the data set open in Stata because if you look at your variables window, you now see that there's a list of all of the variables in your data set. Now, when I use the phrase opening your data in Stata, that's an important phrase to consider because what I'm doing essentially is I'm making a copy of my data set and putting it into Stata so that I can play around with this data set in Stata. What I do not want to do is make any changes to the Framingham data set because I want to make sure that I'm using the same data set throughout this course. So make sure that once you're in Stata, when you've opened your data set, make sure that you don't save over anything that's in the Framingham data set unless we explicitly tell you to do so. But I doubt that that will happen throughout this course. So be sure that you don't save over your data set. So now that we've read our data set into Stata, we can start playing around with the data set and exploring the data set. And a good starting place to do that is through the data browser, which is this icon up here with the little magnifying glass, and the data editor with the little pencil. So there's a subtle difference between the data browser and the data editor. I'm going to open up the data browser first. And what it allows you to do is it allows you to browse through your data. The keyword there being browse. I can't make any changes to my data set using the data browser. Just want to look at the data set, use the browser. On the other hand, if I want to make any changes or manipulations to my data set, which in this case I don't, I'm just letting you know how to do it. If I wanted to make changes, I would do this through the data editor. As an example, if I wanted to delete an observation in my data set, I could just click on that cell and I could hit the delete key on my keyboard. And then I click outside and it asks me, whoa, 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 are you sure you really want to delete that cell? In this case, I would say no, but if you wanted to delete a cell, that's the way that you would do it. If I wanted, I could delete a whole column in my data set by clicking on the variable name, right-clicking, and going to drop selected data. And that would just delete the random ID variable from my data set. If I wanted to delete one observation from my data set, I would click on the observation number, right-click, go down, drop selected data. Do you really want to do that? No. So we've learned how to delete one cell, we can delete a variable, we can delete an observation. In practice, you're going to want to be really careful if you're doing that. Probably don't save over your data. But this is how to manipulate data within the data editor. Another thing that's very useful in practice is the ability to sort your data set. So again, if I wanted to sort based on the random ID variable, I would right-click on random ID. I would go down in this list, and I would click on Sort Data. And I want to sort on random ID and hit OK. And you'll now see that my data set is sorted with respect to this random ID variable. So that's one of those things that will be very useful in practice. All right, so we've briefly explored the data editor. You can close out of that now and go back to your Stata window. So this concludes the Getting Started with Stata session. Hopefully you've picked up some pointers on the general Stata interface and the difference between the drop-down menus and the command line. You've also learned how to explore your data set using the data browser and the data editor.